I decided that I wanted to save this one for last since it's the one that my thoughts have changed on most since my original review. Do I still think Disney isn't at fault for what happened with the sequel trilogy? Well, after doing more research and looking more into stuff that happened behind the scenes, my answer to that is no. A very strong no. While Disney isn't the biggest reason for why it failed, their inputs certainly didn't help. I think it goes without saying that Bob Iger really doesn't have Walt Disney's best interests at heart. If he came back to life and saw what's been done to his company, I'm pretty sure he would have a stroke and die again, just trying to turn everything into a monopoly so they can be at the top of the game regardless of what it means for media in the future. And now they got Star Wars in their clutches, using it to milk money out of a popular IP to increase their reach.
Their empire grows strong.
It was humorous at first, but now it's gotten long past the point of being funny. Disney doesn't think they have to try anymore because now they're too big to suffer long-term consequences for a failed product. It doesn't seem to matter if they lose money from Star Wars because they're still making money off of other things. And they're blissfully unaware of the long-term damage being caused to the IP because they only seem to care about profit. Remember the Disney that actually cared about artistic integrity? The one that brought us all those hand-drawn 2D animated classics that we loved as kids then rediscovered as adults and loved even more? That Disney no longer exists, because today's Disney doesn't concern itself with a movie's quality, only if it makes money. The thing is, they seem to view Star Wars as the big one. The one that'll guarantee them big bucks since it was the biggest IP in entertainment when they bought it from George Lucas. But in their carelessness, they underestimated the importance of that name, and mistreating it for profit resulted in a total disaster. And now they're in too deep to pedal back. They practically went in a panic mode during production of Episode 9 because they knew people weren't exactly happy with Episode 8. They actually believed that just retconning The Last Jedi would magically fix everything. And instead it just made everything worse. This is the problem with Disney's ownership of Star Wars. Just like Kathleen Kennedy, they don't understand it in the slightest, only seeing it as a means to boost profits. They seem to think that Star Wars is just like any other franchise, undermining the significance it had on pop culture and how important it actually is. They bought it for $4 billion and then proceeded to desecrate everything that made it worth $4 billion in the first place. Oh, and here's a little bit of trivia. Iger was originally going to give George less than $4 billion for Star Wars, and only went with $4 billion because George didn't like the idea of Star Wars being less valuable than Marvel. There's actually a lot to go into in order to fully understand how little Disney thinks of Star Wars, but the best way to put it is that they've done a bad job managing it. Oversaturating it with far too much content at once, making the IP less special and more generic, overwhelming the merchandise by trying to force the toys down your throat, trying to turn it into the next Marvel Cinematic Universe with side movies and side series that no one except people who are slaves to their obsession with Star Wars are gonna give a shit about. Disney does not value Star Wars as a creative work of art. It only thinks of Star Wars as a cash cow, and they're hell-bent on milking it for all it's worth to satisfy their unsatisfiable greed. And in general, it's become very tiring to see Disney like this. Disney is not Disney anymore. Yes, you can make the argument that they're still making good movies, but just the name Disney leaves a bitter taste in my mouth these days, because it no longer represents the magic of great storytelling through animation, or the handful of well-made live-action movies during the 1990s and early 2000s. Now it represents the face of a company that will stop at nothing until it buys out everything everywhere, trying to take over the world of media one step at a time. And the most egregious example of how greedy they've become can be summed up with one word: nostalgia. Here's a little fun fact for you. There's actually been a lot of people who've been wanting me to talk about the Mulan live-action remake. They really seem to want me to review it and see what I have to say about it. But in spite of actually having seen the movie, it was on a Fire Stick with my dad, I just couldn't build up the motivation to talk about it. Even if I just wanted to make some money off the topic with ad revenue, it just wouldn't be worth it, because I just can't bring myself to care anymore. After The Lion King 2019, I have become so fucking sick of Disney just exploiting people's nostalgia for money, and milking the legacy of their animated films with these shitty live-action remakes. And it's very depressing to see them treating Star Wars in the exact same way, exploiting people's nostalgia for it to keep milking money off a popular IP. We all know Rise of Skywalker is a shameless rehash of Return of the Jedi, but here's something else. One of the trailers for Episode 9 is just a clip show of all the original movies, and it's all been leading up to this kind of way. Like people were actually excited to see the conclusion to this train wreck. They practically know they're mostly creatively bankrupt at this point, and are now on a never-ending kick of recycling stuff they've already done, hoping there's enough people who are actually desperate and stupid enough to pay money to see a watered-down version of something they grew up with as a kid, because they're nothing but slaves to their nostalgia. And through this exploitation of nostalgia, Disney has taken what was once the grandest IP on the face of the earth and turned it into just another generic sci-fi series. There's hardly anything truly unique coming out of Disney's Star Wars. And now that the sequel trilogy is done, their hands are tied on what to do now that they butchered the Skywalker saga. They have no idea what they're doing, how to pay proper respect to the IP, and now they're stuck with this cash cow that was once a respected name in the realm of film. And even beyond that, the company has recently gone out of its way to show off its true colors in terms of what it's willing to do just for some extra cash. Not only are they greedy, they're also pretty morally corrupt, to the point that I no longer feel comfortable with the prospect of giving them financial support. Between throwing Johnny Depp under the bus after the shit Amber Heard put him through, the way they fucked over that kid who was a big fan of Spider-Man as he was dying from a terminal illness, swindling Star Wars Theory for all the hard work he put into his Vader project, and actually sending a literal thank you to concentration camps in China, I legitimately do not want a Disney Plus subscription in my possession. If you want more information on this and other stuff that's very wrong with Disney, I highly recommend this video by Just Stop, as he goes into far more detail about this than I have time to. Bottom line,